Hell Let Loose. It's something different. It's something different from the likes of Battlefield and Call of Duty. It's for someone who wants something truly different to scratch that first-person shooter itch. Hell Let Loose is a military simulator or milsim type of shooter, where there is a command structure that relays orders down to officers to where the officers relay orders to their men. And from there, you complete objectives, or you fight the enemy, whatever you have to complete your objective and win the game. Now, with the holidays approaching, you or someone you may know might be looking for a game to play, something different from what you've already been playing. Maybe you've eyed up this game before and you want to at least know a little bit about it, and maybe if you already have bought the game and you're new to the game, you might want to know a little bit about that. But we're going to touch on all of that in this video, essentially culminating in what I'll say, how to play Hell Let Loose right. Now, once you boot up the game and open it for the first time, you should see a screen very similar to this. Depending on what you're on, you might have a couple different little iterations. I'm on console, so that's what you see in front of you now. PC is pretty similar, but there should be a couple different little things, but nothing extremely major. Now, with Hell Let Loose being a very complex game, the first thing you should really do when you boot up the game for the first time, or if you're just a newer player, is to go down to basic training and select it and go in and play around a little bit. Once you select the basic training, you'll be sent to a little mini lobby where you can look at a couple things. One being the field manual, where it gives you a couple different little things you can look at in an instructional way, or you can go to the practice range itself, or of course exit back to the main menu. Now, seeing as that the field manual is the first thing you will select when you get into the training mode, let's start with that. So the field manual essentially will give you a rundown of a lot of important aspects of the game. Now, I get it, reading this is very boring, it's a bunch of text, it may be a little confusing, but it's encouraged to at least look around for maybe a couple minutes and just get your bearings of what's going on with this game, because there's a lot to this game, such as the different game modes, the different units and unit leaders, spawn locations, what the commander does, communication aspects, vehicles, other combat stuff, deployables, equipment, and even the different maps that you can play in game. In general, at least take a look at a little bit of this stuff, especially the combat aspect. That way you get a grasp of what to expect when you get into game. Now you've hopefully read the field manual, at least for a couple minutes, let's get to something actually more appealing. The practice range. The practice range essentially is a miniature sandbox mode where you can go and mess around with a lot of the features of the game. You can play a multitude of classes that I'll talk about as we go through the video, and just fire your weapons and get a feel for how the game runs. There's an obstacle course, a supply area, a vehicle area, and a overall rifle range that you can play around with. Now, the practice range is a bit basic, but that's all it really needs to be. It gives you a nice fundamental grasp of moving mechanics, how to fire your weapon, and just other little aspects that can help you a lot if you at least spend a couple minutes in this game mode and just figure things out. Now, while you're in this mode playing around with whatever you wish to play around with, just to get a feel for the game, it's important that you look at your controls and adjust them accordingly to how you like them. To do this, you simply just need to open the pause menu, go to options, and scroll over to controller. For this, you can set your bindings or layout to how you like, depending if you're on PC or console, and you can set them up for different aspects such as infantry, vehicle gunner, artillery, and just other common controls. While you're adjusting your control settings as you need to, it's important to also look at your gameplay, control, video, and audio settings. Make sure that's all set up for you in the same menu. That way you're ready to go on all fronts. Now, at this point, I've talked enough about the field manual, the practice range, so what's actually in the game? So, as I mentioned earlier, it is a milsim. So, it's a military simulator. And the way that these games kind of work is that there is a set command structure that works its way down the ranks. For example, you have a commander at the top that calls in your ordnance, or your airstrikes, and basically tries to command the team around to get objectives done. From the commander, it goes down to 3 different types of officer or squad leads. The infantry squad leader or officer, the tank commander, and spotter. The infantry squad lead or officer are the ones that lead the regular infantry. These are squads of up to 6 people working in conjunction with the different roles that I'll get to in a little bit to complete objectives, whether that may be taking a point, moving on a flank, destroying enemy units, whatever it might be. The next type of squad lead you have that hears from the commander is the tank commander. This one's pretty self-explanatory. They're the commander of a tank crew. These tank crews consist of up to 3 players, and they, well, run tanks. They operate tanks and support whoever they need to and or go where they need to go. It just depends on the situation you find yourself in. The third and final squad leader that hears from the commander is the spotter. This is the commander of a 2-man recon team or sniper team, depending on how you wish to see it. These guys essentially are behind the lines guys that do reconnaissance work and behind the lines sabotage. But they can receive orders from command to move as they need to or report back their findings. So now that I've discussed at least some little inner workings of the game, what you should do before you step into a match, let's talk about when you actually get in game. And if it's your first game, you're probably going to die, and you're going to die a lot. Don't let this discourage you. This game has a little bit more of a learning curve on the battlefield than a game like Call of Duty or Battlefield playing those games for the first time. With this game being more of a realistic kind of shooter, the time to kill is very short, especially if you're hitting players in the chest or head. Now, there is a bit of a simple way to somewhat prevent this. Don't treat this game like Battlefield or Call of Duty. It is not a run and gun simulator. You have to be very careful and tactical with your movements. And the thing I would say to this is move a bit slower, move from cover to cover, be a little bit more weary of your area around you for enemies and where your allies are. Now with this though, it's important that you're looking for movement. If you're moving cover to cover and you're watching ahead of you, you'll probably notice enemy movement a bit more as you're waiting patiently for the enemy almost to come to you. So don't be the one caught out in the open, be the one catching the enemy out in the open. Now, you'll probably still die a fair amount in your first game regardless because you just won't know where the enemies are when you're playing the game. But at least if you're moving cover to cover and work with your squad and your team as a whole, this aspect should start to go down less and less as you get more comfortable with the game. Other ways you can mitigate dying more in Battlefield is working together with your team and more especially your squad. So the game is divvied up into 2 different types of players on your team, those marked in blue and those marked in green. Those marked in blue are just other teammates in other squads. Those marked in green are your squad mates. These are the guys you should be working with especially to overcome obstacles, whether that be enemy tanks, enemy infantry, and just capturing objectives. These guys you can communicate with to take down enemy vehicles, deal with enemy infantry, and just anything else that gets thrown your way. A good 5-man or 6-man team can really turn the tide of battle, so it's important that you work with these guys as best as you can. So, the better you work with your squad, the better your results will most likely be in both the win column and your overall performance column. Now, to enhance this, a big thing in this game is communication. It's important to have a mic or at least some way to communicate with your team in a voice fashion. Now, if you don't have a mic or you're really someone who is not comfortable talking just yet, Team 17 has implemented a non-verbal communications aspect that you can access, which for PC is whatever you've bound it to, but at least on controller it should be on your D-pad. Again, it all depends on what you've set your bindings to. Communication is vital in this game. The better a team communicates in battle will lead to victories more often than not than the team that doesn't communicate. And although that sounds very Captain Obvious-ish, you'll be surprised how much of this doesn't translate in the average games at times, where communication among squads or squad leaders is just not that apparent. By not communicating, it's going to inflict heavy losses on your teams, whether that is in the infantry front or on the tank front. If your team isn't communicating where the enemy infantry is coming from, it's going to be harder to stop an enemy attack on maybe your defense point. If you don't communicate that there's an enemy tank at some place, your armor might get destroyed because they didn't know that there was a tank around them. So the more you communicate, the better your games will overall be, Even if you end up losing a match, it'll be a lot tighter than you might think it is. And it just leads to better games overall for everyone involved. Now, when it comes to the combat, besides some of the obvious things of obviously kill the enemy, make sure they don't kill you, is the suppression mechanic. Now, as you see, this machine gunner is firing a lot into an open field because the enemies are in that field. This is to suppress them. So the way how this works is if you're shooting at an enemy and you don't hit them, but you're shooting near an enemy, you will suppress them. It'll shake their screen, and it'll make it harder to aim and operate. Now, in regards to how you should be shooting at things, this might change depending on what role you'll play, but we'll get to that in a little bit towards the end of the video. Now, another thing I want to touch on is the health system and how it works. So if you do take a hit and you survive the hit, maybe you get hit in the leg or a long-range rifle shot that loses its damage over distance, you do have the ability to heal yourself in the form of using bandages. Now, you do get 2 regardless of what class you play, besides the medic, which gets 20. And I'll show you what that looks like on screen. So I took a hit from the left, I survived, I was able to equip my bandages, I start bandaging myself until the circle is complete, and now I'm back to full health. If I let this go, then I will start to bleed out slowly, and I could die in a matter of minutes, if not seconds. Now, if I decide to let go, this is what you see on screen now. I fill up the circle until it says letting go, it's fully filled, and you're killed in action. That means you've been officially killed, and you need to respawn at a spawn point. And in regards to the spawn points you can spawn at, well, I'll get to that at a later point in the video as well, after we talk about the classes you can play. So with that, let's get into what roles or classes you can play. Now, currently in the game, there are 4 factions in the game. The USA, the Germans, the Russians, and the British. Now, each of the classes, you can customize a little bit with different little headgears or helmets that are historically accurate. There's nothing really wonky about any of the hats or helmets or the uniforms. Each of the classes we're about to talk about do have different little subclasses where you get different equipment with them. Again, I'm not going to dip too much into what each class gets, but I digress. But from there, I want to go into what each class essentially does. So you have the commander, which is the overall commander, like I've already talked about, that runs the show. Officers, that they talk to their squad leads, take orders from the commander. You have your riflemen, which is basically your light infantry, typically just equipped with, well, a rifle. And they are your simple light infantry. They don't do anything really special. They are just regular infantry. Then you have your assaults. These guys are essentially your pushing classes or attacking classes. They're really good at close to medium range. They usually have a submachine gun or semi-automatic rifle, depending on your faction. From there, you have the automatic rifleman, basically just a rifleman, but with a weapon like a BAR, an STG-44, a Bren gun, or a PPSH with a drum mag. Just something with a lot of automatic firepower that the automatic rifleman can bring to a firefight. The next role down is the medic. Their one role is to keep people alive. They have a medical syringe that can revive downed players, and they have plenty of bandages to basically save you from using bandages if they're in your vicinity, or when you get revived, they can bandage you up at the same time. After medic, you have the support player, which essentially they are the ammo guy or the supply box guy. These guys deliver much needed supplies to your squad for things to either be built or for ammo to be brought up for the classes that need it. From there, you have the machine gunners class. Now, they're pretty self-explanatory. You have a machine gun. Your job is basically to fire a lot of lead downrange for suppressing fire effect and to basically cut down large formations of enemy infantry. The next class up from the machine gunner is the AT or anti-tank soldier. Essentially, these guys have rocket launchers, satchel charges, and buildable AT guns to destroy enemy vehicles and tanks alike. The last infantry class you have is the engineer. These guys are able to build fortifications, but also when you unlock the sapper or field engineer class, they can destroy enemy fortifications by using satchel charges. Now, that's all the infantry roles or class you can play. The other classes you have are the tank commander and tank crew. These guys run your tanks or your armor. And then you have the spotter and sniper roles, which are under recon. As I've already mentioned, these guys are the behind-the-lines sabotage and behind-the-lines reconnaissance. Now, when you get in game or you're starting to play a couple matches, it's recommended that you just simply join the regular infantry and play as a rifleman. This is because of two things. One, unlike all the other classes I've already mentioned, you can have up to 6 riflemen in a squad. So no matter what, the class will always be open. And then secondly, because it's a basic class, there's not a lot going on with it, and it makes it easy for someone to get a grasp of the combat mechanics while in an actual game. Once you feel comfortable enough with the game mechanics and combat in general, you may be advised to pick another class, see what all the other classes have to deal with, and if you're ever unsure, you can always go back to the practice range and see what the classes have, at least for the Americans as for now. But in general, it's still a good place to see what the other classes have and see how comfortable you can be with them. Now, in terms of spawn points, there are a handful to know about. We'll start off with the shortest length spawn points to the longest. So the first one you'll notice is the HQ spawns. These are the ones at the essentially back of the maps. Each side has them, and you can spawn in every 10 seconds. From there, you have your outpost spawns, which the officers can place down for their squads, and these are squad-only spawns. So only your squad can spawn on an outpost that your officer places down for you, and you can spawn in on these every 20 seconds. The next spawn you have is the airhead spawn. This is a spawn the commander can call in as an airdrop, and is provided it gets to its destination safely, it can let you spawn in a given location where it's dropped at, typically behind the enemy lines. The spawn timer is 30 seconds, and the airhead itself is active for 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, it disappears, provided it's not destroyed earlier before that. The fourth spawn you have in the game that you can use is the garrison spawn. This is a spawn that a commander, officer, or spotter can put down and the entire team can use, much like an airhead. The spawn timer is 40 seconds long. The fifth and final spawn you might see in battle is the half-track spawn. The commander can call these in using fuel, and they'll spawn at one of your 3 HQs wherever the commander deploys it at. From there, it has to be driven to the front for wherever you need it at, and once it's stopped and the engine is no longer running, it can act as a spawn point. However, it does have the longest spawn timer at 60 seconds. So these are nice spawns in between, but they are pretty long. Keep that in mind. So now we've touched on just the basics, the game modes, and overall some spawn points, some important little aspects you should know. Let's talk about the game modes that you'll be playing that are currently in the game. So there's only 2 game modes, one being Warfare and the other being Offensive. So Warfare essentially is a tug-of-war kind of mode that your team has to defend a point while attacking another point. Now at the start of the game, the point is neutral, but once one team takes it, it becomes a tug-of-war. Your job is to hold at least 3 points by the end of the game. Essentially, you need to hold the middle point. But it can go back and forth, and as long as you hold it by the time the timer stops, you win the game. There is no overtime in this mode. The second and only other game mode you have is Offensive. This is where you have one attacking only team and one defending only team. So the attacker's job is to conquer the entire map. They have 30 minutes to capture each point. So what that means is they have 30 minutes to capture 1 point. If they capture it, the timer resets to 30, and it keeps going until either the timer runs out or they take the entire map. And the defenders have one job: keep the attackers from taking the entire map. As long as you hold at least one objective by the end of the game, you win the match. It doesn't matter if you defend the first point or the 5th point. As long as you hold one, you win the match. Now, there is an overtime feature in this game mode. If the attacking team is capturing their objective, when the timer reaches 0, the game keeps going. And the way it works is that after there's 0 seconds left on the clock, the timer will be converted into a manpower ticker. And what it does is, once you're out of time, it takes from the commander's resource of manpower, which they use to call in certain abilities. This manpower resource will tick down until one of 2 things either happens. A, either the objective gets taken, or the defenders push the attackers out and reduce the capture progress to absolute 0. Now, if the fighting continues and the objective is contested, or neither side can break the deadlock and it's just constantly contested, if the attacking team runs out of manpower before they take the point, the game is over and the defenders will win. Hell Let Loose has a lot of things in this game compared to other shooters. And if you've gotten this far in the video, you've probably noticed that. But it is a fun game. And if you're looking for something different, it's got that. If you can get a nice group of friends to play with you as well, it's even better. But you can always find some cool clans in the game and probably work with them, and you'll have an even better time, especially if you find one that really suits how you like to play the game. But for now, go have some fun. Go play the game, take what you learned from this video, go have some fun. When you're ready, come back to the channel. I've got plenty of other videos about other little things that you get interested in. But go have fun. I'll see you in the next video.